You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right, every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to share the news from the last few weeks. Sometimes the location of holidays like Memorial Day makes it harder to stay on the every 2-week train, but we're working on it, and we're here now. And as we do when we're Han Solo, we share some of the Talking Headways podcasts coming up soon. We finished shows with Daniel Baxter about running to work, which was really fascinating for me as a former runner. I hope you all got a chance to listen to Ross Peterson on non-emergency medical transport as well. That was a super fascinating episode, especially on things that I had not understood or knew before or understand. I mean, the amount of money that goes into Medicaid for transportation is crazy. It's amazing. And how some local small agencies use FTA match funds to try to get some of that Medicaid money as well. It's interesting, just interesting how we provide rides to and from hospitals and other medical appointments for folks that need it. And Bill Schulteis on the NACTO and ASHTO guides was on. Thanks to Ryan Wozniak for prodding that one along. We really appreciate that. That was a really fascinating episode too. I really like chatting with Bill, especially about him talking about going into depositions as an engineer and trying to get stumped by the attorneys, trying to fake him out and prove that he's not an expert, which is really interesting way to look at things. And then, so those are the ones that we've had the last couple of weeks. I hope folks get a chance to listen to those. They're really, really super interesting. And coming up in the next few weeks, we've got Sujata Srivastava from Spur. She's coming on to talk about San Francisco and some of the downtown recovery stuff that's been going on. That's been going to be really fascinating for you all to listen to. I had a fun time talking with my old friend Sujata. We've also got Chris Burdick on the show to talk about his new book called Clamor, which is about noise, good and bad. That was really fascinating too. And it goes along my recent theme of talking about Reagan era stuff that happened in terms of the EPA and noise abatement and stuff like that. Really fascinating discussion with Chris. Sam Sargent, formerly of Caltrain and now VTA, will be on the show. Sam joined us for our 2020 election night show on YouTube, which was fun. We did like 9 hours or 6 hours of show that night. That was awesome. Sam joined us then. He'll be coming back to have an actual podcast episode. Ilana Prus will come on the show soon to talk about stuff related to economic development. David Prythurch will be back on the show again, talking about his new book, Reclaiming the Road. Carol Martins will be back. And then we have much, much more planned out throughout the summer. Once a week. I don't know how we do it. Who really knows how we get all these episodes out every single week? I'm just really impressed that I've been able to have an interview every week, scheduling and everything. Usually, sometimes actually, I get 8 weeks ahead, which is funny because people are like, when's this show coming out? I'm like, well, in about 2 months. And I don't know why I get so far ahead of myself. I think it was around Christmas time, and I'm just trying to get a bunch of shows in so I don't have to do stuff over the break. But yeah, we've now we're actually only 1 week ahead, I think. So I'm trying to figure out shows so that we can pack it up. So on the summer vacation that's coming up at the end of July, we have some stuff to fill in the gap. But like I said, we've got stuff planned throughout the summer, so check it out. And on to our internal advertisements. Thanks to everyone who's ordered Bus and Bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Bike-only knit scarves are also back in stock. And as we always note, we really thank everybody for supporting the show on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire. As you all have found out, some of you have found out, if you are a Patreon member and you give just $1 a month, you can actually have ad-free shows. If you go to the Patreon, if you actually go to the show notes, there's like a little explainer in there discussing how you can, if you're a Patreon member, how you can do it, how you can go in and get those shows without the ads, which you're going to get these ads because I'm going to leave these in, but you're not going to get the ads from outside advertisers that happen through Libsyn. which is our host for serving ads and also for serving up the episodes through our RS feeder to your podcatcher of choice, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, you can support the show by going to bookshop.org/shop/the-overhead-wire. You can buy books off the site. Anything, if you're in our shop, you can buy any book off the site. We also have the list of all the books that we've had authors on to talk about their books on the show, the Overhead Wire Book Club, so check that out if you get a chance. Also, we have Cars Are Cholesterol t-shirts where we designed this really cool logo that says Cars Are Cholesterol. The cars are driving into the city, which looks like a heart. Richard Uzinski designed that. Go to bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. You can find Richard on Instagram at Dick David Sketches. Also, we strongly suggest folks sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to everybody who's been listening. And now let's get to that show you've all been waiting for, all the news. This is episode 172. We're live and in session. And of course, before we get to the show, you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course, Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you feel so inclined. Okay, the news. We're starting off the news. Oh, and also want to mention, it was so great to have Chrissy on last time. She's always super busy and doing amazing work around the country, so it's good when we can get her to come on the show. This summer, I'll try to get a few more folks come on the show for the Monday show so we can have longer conversations about a shorter amount of items. Today, obviously, it's a Han Solo day, so we've got a lot to get through. And also, we've been out for 3 weeks because of Memorial Day, so we'll have a lot to get through in terms of what we cover. So let's start out. Let's get going. The Highway Trust Fund ran out of money a long time ago. The Federal Highway Trust Fund, which supports transportation projects around the country, is likely to become insolvent by 2028. In reality, the fund, which is reliant on declining gas tax revenues and general fund transfers, effectively ran out of money in 2008 and has been limping along ever since. This suggests it's long past time to rethink the funding mechanism and the programs it supports. This was by Steve Davis in Transportation for America. So the gas tax, obviously, as you all know, because you've been listening to the show for a long time, since 1992, we haven't updated it for inflation. We haven't updated it for anything. So it's lost like half its purchasing power. And so now the general fund, from 2008 until now, we've used the general fund as a way to fund transportation projects, not just the gas tax. And as everybody knows also that, the gas tax doesn't really fund all transportation. Obviously, states and local entities pay for most of the roads you drive on. They pay property taxes and stuff like that. So when you ever hear somebody tell some cyclist, oh, you don't pay your fair share because you don't pay gas tax, that's not true. Their property tax pay for the roads that they go on most of the time. So silly stuff like that still pops up from time to time. But the Highway Trust Fund did run out of money, and that's how we've been funding a lot of the road projects around the country. And it's kind of high time to start rethinking that. And Transportation for America is starting to think about that. So I highly recommend going and checking out this article. But it's just good to know that folks are kind of bird dogging this as it comes along. There's also a lot of other stuff going on. There's, obviously there's the discussion about vehicle miles traveled taxes or reducing vehicle miles traveled. There's road user charges, which we had a podcast about maybe a year ago or so. There's a lot of discussion about how to get transportation policy to pay for the roads that we use, especially the federal roads. And it'd be really interesting, not just the roads too. I like the transit systems and stuff. We could actually produce more money for the transit systems. That would be really great. Next up, power plant regulation seen as a linchpin. In an effort to suppress climate change activism and bolster the oil and gas industry, the Environmental Protection Agency under Trump is looking to eliminate emissions limits for gas and coal power plants. These plants account for 25% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. If the rollback is successful, it could pave the way for new dismantling of other regulations aimed at curbing harmful climate impacts. This was by Lisa Friedman in New York Times. So basically, EPA Administrator, Trump administration, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin is just trying to basically crack open climate protections for the country. All these things that we've done to try to reduce emissions, reduce pollution, are now targeted by the Trump administration. We know that they're really trying to go after the specific harms that climate change is doing through the greenhouse gases that are regulated. I know that they're going to go after, they're trying to get some court cases together so they can go after the finding from 2009 that found that those gases were harms, and so it should be regulated by the EPA. If they do that and are successful, it's likely that a lot of the climate change activism stuff, from the federal government side anyways, is going to be hard to reproduce. And it's frustrating because there's so much pollution from power plants. Grist just had an article about paper plants that are going under the radar about how much pollution they produce. A lot of this stuff is in communities where environmental justice communities where there's downstream effects as well. And it's just frustrating to see the Trump administration really, really push back on climate science and climate change just as we were getting going. And so I hope this doesn't lead to a lot of other stuff. We'll talk about some pollution and the impacts of it in a bit of diesel fuel. But I hope this doesn't like kind of go backwards where we're going back to, they're trying to get rid of California emissions as well. The Senate just voted against that. And so obviously, that goes a little bit against what their stated preference of states' rights is. But at the same time, what's really bad about it is that, the reason why we have California emissions is to reduce the smog-forming particles. And a lot of the haze that happened, smog and otherwise, that happened because of driving around in Los Angeles, the Bay Area, etc. And so it's actually cleaned up our skies a lot. We could do a lot better. There's still a ton of particulate matter. There's still a lot of emissions. But that's what they're targeting. They're targeting, California emissions. They're targeting power plants. They're actually removing environmental justice protections. We're going to have to, figure something out to save some of this stuff, but this is what they're going after. Nation's first shared streets law. In the first-in-the-nation law passed by Washington State, will give cities the legal authority to create shared streets that give pedestrians priority starting July 27th. The law limits vehicle speeds to 10 miles per hour, makes pedestrians the primary users above bikes and cars, and gets rid of jaywalking laws. These types of streets, called woonerf in Dutch, are well known throughout Europe and can also contain hardscaping, bollards, and even tables and chairs outside of a central clear zone for movement. This was by Mark Ostro in the Urbanist. Great job lately, the Urbanist. You guys have been covering a lot of really good stuff coming out of Washington State. So this is really cool, a new law at the state level to promote shared streets. And I will hope more cities and states do this because it's really great and safe. Once we can slow down cars on some of these side streets that should really be 10 miles per hour zones anyways, we can actually have more walking and biking and moving around these places without having to worry about getting hit by a car. I wish my street was a slow street, a 10 mile per hour pedestrian street, shared street. It would be really nice. My street's really narrow. And so, and it's hard for two cars to pass each other, but that's actually good because it actually slows them down, except for the police officers. For some reason, there's always a police officer speeding down the street in the center lane. I don't understand why, but they just do it. And I don't know why I do this to myself. I always eat a couple chips or something beforehand because I'm hungry at the end of the day before I record the Monday show, and then I can't talk. So if you hear some stuttering, it's probably because I had some salty chips and drank some water, and now my tongue doesn't work for some reason or another. Just a quirk of recording at 4:30 in the afternoon. U.S. built social housing. In a 2-year period during World War I, the United States government built social housing in 80 different projects for almost 100,000 people in 26 states. But they weren't just temporary spaces, they were whole neighborhoods with commercial spaces and schools. After the war, the government began selling homes at reasonable rates to the tenants who lived in them as a path to stable homeownership. This was by Aaron Ben Joseph in The Conversation. This is kind of mirrors a lot of the research that I've seen about World War I and other time periods where there was a shortage in housing, and some really quick thinking happened to either build social housing. During the World War II, they built a worker housing for all the folks at shipyards and stuff in the Bay Area here specifically, but also around the country. And then also during some of those times, that, according to Hank Dittmar's book, they also had home sharing that was more possible. So people would share rooms, and it made it more legal than it might be today. And it was really interesting. It wasn't really boarding houses; it was actually people sharing rooms, and you were able to hold a lot more people in the same space because there are usually a bunch of empty rooms around cities. And so it was a really interesting way to to house more people during times of crisis. And so this could be a model for something that we think about today as we have this housing shortage that we're in, especially in larger cities around the country. So really interesting research by Aaron Ben Joseph. The 50% AV problem. Andrew Miller argues the most dangerous time during the autonomous vehicle transition is not now, but rather when the AV to human driver ratio is at close to 50%. At that point, no single behavioral logic will govern traffic. Absent good policy, the dangerous midway point where driver assistance, conditional automation, and full automation collide could last for decades. This was by Andrew Miller in Changing Lanes. This was a really fascinating article, and I hadn't read anything like this before. Basically saying that, as autonomous vehicles in their present state, if they are to continue in the way they're going, I don't know if they actually can or not, but let's assume they can for the sake of our argument during this article, there will be a time when human drivers right now are 75%, 90% of the drivers out there, 10% are autonomous vehicles. And so it goes by human driver rules. Whatever the human drivers do, then those are the rules of the road. As it gets to like 50% of human drivers versus autonomous drivers, the rules are kind of a mismatch because you're operating with humans driving assisted automation vehicles. You're having automated vehicles who talk to each other but don't necessarily talk to the drivers. Can't really look a driver in the eye and see who goes first. You, me, and then full automation, which is in the end. So there's a 25%, like 50%, 75% threshold, but that 50% is a really messy time when nothing, the rules of the road basically, as humans use it, as autonomous vehicles use it, clash, and it's a really dangerous time when there's more potential for danger, collisions, accidents, and those types of things. I shouldn't say accident, that's the wrong term. It's just so baked into our brains, accident. Oh my gosh. Friends who built their own apartment building. In Seattle, a group of friends who were thinking about leaving Seattle for the suburbs decided to join together to build an apartment building with all the amenities they were missing. Together, they purchased enough land to build a 5-story apartment building that includes their own homes along with 24 additional units. They also acquired the adjacent lot to create a public playground for neighborhood children. This is by Adele Peters and Fast Company. I looked this building up. They actually have some commercial downstairs now too, since they built it. Really fascinating. It's in Seattle. And that'd be really cool. Just like take some of your best friends, and if you can't buy a house by yourself, why not just build a building together and then participate like they do in a program where they own the building and then they operate as a company that owns shares and they rent the building out to other people. It seems like a win-win for everybody. Some people get housing, some people get the benefit of being part of a company. And it also, you get to hang around with your friends and don't move to the suburbs. That's a really cool thing, especially in a place like Seattle where the cost of living is going up, the price of housing is going up really high, and it sounds really awesome. It sounds like they were really cool. It also helps to have one of your friends be a developer who can actually build a building, but it sounds like a good idea, right? Denver to Fort Collins rail line planned. A new passenger rail line from Denver to Fort Collins, Colorado could begin service in 2029 with the support of state officials. The line would be a joint service between the Front Range Passenger Rail District and the Denver Area Regional Transportation District. Funding for the project would come in part from a recently passed fee on rental cars and oil and gas production at the state level. This was by Chase Woodruff in Colorado Newsline. Yeah, that's really cool. I know that the governor has really been talking about doing that regional rail line, front range rail line. And so this would be the start of it. 2029 service. Let's see if that actually happens or not. But there's funding there, and maybe they'll get going. Maui's quick build neighborhood. After wildfires destroyed most of Lahaina, Hawaii, officials began seeking ways to quickly house survivors whose homes would take years to rebuild. One solution came in the form of a new neighborhood built out of prefabricated housing on public land. After 100 days of construction, 600 people were housed. The neighborhood was constructed for $400,000 per unit, including the costs of homes, water, and road infrastructure. Again, Adele Peters and Fast Company. Adele has some of the most cool articles. Follow her if you have an RSS feed. Follow her and Fast Company, as well as our friend Nate Berg over there too. Really good articles lately. Really good information too. So yeah, they actually had to build on some public property. They had to grate the land, which was volcanic rock, which made it harder to put in the utilities and such. But it was really interesting to see how fast they built, and it was a little bit expensive. $400,000 per unit is not cheap, but it's also not like the $800,000 to $1 million are quoted here in like San Francisco. So it's actually much cheaper. And what they're going to do is after those people's houses are built, they're actually going to turn those into public housing as well. So there's a win-win for everybody in some of this new neighborhood. The only thing I'm frustrated by looking at it was its kind of car orientation. It could have been a little bit more urban in the way it was developed, but that's a kind of a nitpick for now, but it would be really more sustainable that way and probably more fire safe if I'm being honest. A better paving system for runoff. To reduce runoff and improve rainwater filtration, some paths in Valencia, Spain have been paved with ceramics over layers of gravel. Tests have shown that this design can filter 10,000 liters of water per square meter per hour. The project is funded by the European Union and the Institute of Ceramic Technologies in order to figure out new uses for low-value excess ceramic materials and find solutions to periods of excess heat and rain. This is by Damon Embling in Euronews. So yeah, win-win. you create this porous surface that can take in rainwater that doesn't lead to flooding, as well as use materials that are locally found in nature and created. Ceramic materials, not just make pots and pans and clay sculptures and things like that, but you can actually also build tiles for your city, which is really fascinating. And I really like this idea that they're like, oh, we have this excess ceramics, why don't we just use them to pave the city instead of just laying around or throwing them in a dump? Maybe they could recycle them too, I don't know. Seattle's newest subway. Seattle is building a new 2.7 mile, 700 million tunnel between popular neighborhoods, but the tunnel is large enough to fit a standard single-track train is being converted to divert runoff, most of which is caused by the impervious surfaces of roads and parking lots. Joe Courtwright wonders why the shifting of drivers' environmental costs onto utility payers isn't part of the broader conversation about the impacts of driving and how governments subsidize transportation. This was by Joe Courtwright in City Observatory, our friend Joe. Who was recently on with Ben Ross recently to talk about, modeling, transportation modeling, which was a really fascinating episode. Go back and listen to that one if you get a chance. Really good insight there where, we talk about the road subsidies and we talked about it earlier actually in the Highway Trust Fund, but we don't talk about all the little subsidies that happen too, like this one. Like we're building a tunnel for runoff in Seattle just for all the runoff that happens because we have so many roads that just channel water. And the impervious surfaces, they just channel water. And so it makes, and just similar to that, the Valencia story, there's a lot of water that can be kind of, collected and brought into the ground rather than channeled into a duct and then going into the ocean or going into a river. And so we spend a lot of money on that. We spend a lot of money on these tunnels to get rid of wastewater or stormwater. And that is kind of another expense of, autocentricity and auto dependence, because we do have all these, surfaces that are built for driving and we can't channel the water or actually can't collect the water, and it causes flooding or it has to be drained somewhere. And so that's another subsidy. And there's so many of them that we talk about when it comes to roads as they are now. Regional project block grants. Federal officials have run block grant programs for housing for years, but a new Brookings report suggests that block grants could be used as a way to support transportation infrastructure projects of regional significance and build local capacity. Often, larger regional projects require more coordination and longer-term funding, but Congress often fails to properly fund projects in that way. This was in Brookings. Yeah, really great idea. Adi Tomer and the folks at Brookings were working on this one. And if this actually is a way, and there's an article in Streetsblog today specifically about this report, I think it would be, and the way that Kia was framing it was basically looking at ways in which, and kind of along the ways that the T4 thing we started out with talks about, is like, maybe we should rethink the way we fund transportation projects, because the way we're doing it now isn't working. We still have 40,000 deaths on the road. We still have a lot of waste. We still have a lot of highway building and spurious economic development claims. But the regional project block grant might be interesting, and it might be a way for regions to do better at funding projects that are more sustainable. That word might get them in trouble in this administration, but in the future, we might be go back to that. So it would be nice if there's this block grant for big projects that kind of pushes everything together. I know that they tried this in terms of like thinking about multiple different projects from different agencies together in terms of funding, but it would be interesting to see kind of all this stuff put together. And maybe we need to start thinking holistically a little better these days. There's so much going on and so much funding, so many funding sources, that it might be good to start to kind of cluster these in and be more efficient with them. Okay, now that those are the main items, those are the items that were most popular over the last 3 weeks, we have bonus items. These are the items that I thought were interesting, but maybe the readers didn't click on as much as the other ones, which is okay. But I wanted to bring them back because I thought they were really fascinating, and hopefully you all find them fascinating as well. A bill in Montana headed to the governor's desk would overrule a 1973 law that would allow transit agencies owned by municipalities to extend outside of their jurisdictions to serve adjacent communities. This was in the Daily Montanan. That'd be great. Move transit agencies not just in the city line. You can go outside because, basically a jurisdiction doesn't end at the line. It actually continues on usually. The New York Times takes a deep dive with charts and graphs showing what has improved since the implementation of decongestion pricing. Turns out many, many things have improved. This was in the New York Times. Emily Badger did this one along with some other folks. Yeah, so many great things happening with congestion pricing. It's really, really just like one of these policy solutions that has really brought positivity to the discussion. I'm so glad it happened. I know that there's a lot of people at the administration that are trying to kill it, but they're likely to lose the lawsuits. But yeah, there's so much good stuff. There's reduced travel times. There's reduced noise, reduced emissions, reduced travel times for bus riders, reduced travel times for folks going through the tunnels, less honking. There's just so much stuff that they've measured that's actually improved since they instituted congestion pricing. So interesting. And hopefully that can, move its way other places, especially as we're seeing more of these autonomous vehicles who are going to be driving these zombie miles. We should charge them more for zombie miles than less, where they're paying a lot more to just cruise around empty and clogging up the roads. The EPA is rolling back rules from the Biden administration that would further restrict forever chemicals in drinking water. Utilities have complained in the past, saying the changes needed to protect people were too expensive. This is in the Associated Press. Sometimes it's good to spend money on stuff like getting chemicals out of our drinking water. The EPA right now is just a mess. And, we're going to see a lot more problems coming from what is happening from the regulatory environment there now. And it's frustrating, but this is just another example of pollution that's going to happen because we're way too friendly to accommodating some of these complaints when we should be regulating to the extent that we can make people safe. A company in Amsterdam called Delft Power seeks to bring together all the companies that serve drivers of electric cars in order to create some order by coordinating drivers, grid operators, energy companies, and charging companies. The result is a system that tells drivers when the best time to charge is based on electricity needs of the community and could even result in more housing. This is by Clean Technica. Really interesting. They're basically creating like an app that people have that can tell you when the best time to charge is and actually might pay you money to charge your car at certain times because it takes the stress off the energy grid. So if you have an electric car, you might be able to figure out when the best time to charge is, how much money you might be able to make from, being on the grid at a certain time versus other times. Maybe making sure that everybody's on the same page, whether that's the energy companies or the charging companies. They have these chargers laid out. I know some folks are not excited about this because they feel like the chargers will take up space in cities, and I agree with that to a certain extent. But I'd rather have the electric cars than the full blown gas ones, and the high mileage cars in the city than the ones that are spewing the bad stuff. And I think my complaint mostly is with much older vehicles because you can like smell and feel the pollution that comes out of them. Anytime some old hoopty vehicle drives down the street and it's just spewing emissions, I'm just like, oh, I wish that it was electric. And I think that's the way probably a lot of people feel. A lot of the newer cars are much better. They have much better emissions, California emissions. But the older ones, those are the ones, and that's what the low emission zones are targeting too. And in London and other places, they're targeting those older vehicles that really, really spew pollution. So this is interesting. I hope that to see what happens with this coordinating platform. Governor Jared Polis of Colorado signed an executive order stating that in order to get $100 million worth of state transportation and energy funding, cities must pass housing reforms that are part of existing state laws. This was in Colorado Public Radio. A number of those jurisdictions have sued already, so we'll see how that works out. And next up, this one is a little longer. I wrote this as my intro for the newsletter one day. Again, I am on Substack, and I write this in the newsletter intro twice a week. I try to do a long form thing. I also put it on the website as well if you feel so inclined, if you don't want to like Substack. Substack is one that's drawing controversy, but I also feel like there's just trying to be where people are. And we've been so split up by the social media damages that people like Elon Musk have done that I'm trying to find the listeners and readers and like-minded folks anywhere I can. Substack is one of those places, so I write there. But I also put this on my this actually starts off on my newsletter, which is the main place where I communicate with folks. But it's also on my website too. So anyways, I wrote this piece. I try to write these longer pieces twice a week, try to get like my brain flowing, try to get like some connections going. And I thought this was a really fascinating topic. New research from the University of Rochester in New York suggests that children in urban areas are more likely to develop allergies than those in rural areas. The researchers believe that gut microbiomes and how they develop play a part in this bifurcation. While the introduction of more healthy microbes in rural areas may play a part, I would also lean towards another path that could explain this divergence. I don't know for sure, of course, so take this with a grain of salt, but exposure to particulates and exhaust that create polluted air, as well as the prevalence of microplastics in cities, is something I would seriously look at as a culprit. Today, walking back from dropping my daughter off at daycare, I noticed how many cars and big tech buses were driving down the street spewing emissions as they went. Of course, it's better for them to go together on the bus, but this is also a failure of our land use policies that we have to create different systems to take them to work. I also lament the amount of plastics in food containers and packaging we see in stores, but it also comes from tires and other outside sources in the urban environment. We don't need to plastic wrap 2 ears of corn, people. I'm making an educated guess at this because we know the amount of microplastics in human bodies has been going up over time. We also know that there are potential connections being made between particulate matter and emissions that are more prevalent and created by cities with Alzheimer's, dementia, and other diseases. But there's also some hope for urban children with their lungs and ability to eat certain foods if elected leaders focus hard on the problem. We know that Paris has dramatically reduced air pollution in the city, and low emission zones in other cities have been reducing nitrogen pollution and other pollutants. Additionally, improvements like Caltrain's electrification reduce black carbon particles 89%, and California warehouse rules are making trucks take trips away from neighborhoods. For me, reduced emissions isn't about climate change alone. It's about creating a culture of good health. And you shouldn't have to live in a rural area to reduce the risk of growing up with allergies or respiratory issues or cognitive impacts later in life. It's in this way those that are slashing climate and environmental funding and rules while promoting endless auto dependence fail us and our futures. So go check that out if you want to get, there's a lot of links in there actually to other articles and research that we've collected. Also, I found a lot of those articles that when I write these things, I found a lot of the articles for linking in our archive, which now has 100,000 items. So there's stuff in there. Cutting the Energy Star program will be seen as a grave mistake, especially as more energy-intensive uses like data centers are planned and constructed. Loss of the program's benchmarking and energy management systems are likely to result in less reliable energy grids and more expensive utility bills for buildings. This was in Heat Map. Street festivals are getting more expensive to put on, which means that many of people's favorite events could disappear at some point in the near future. Smaller vendors are having a hard time keeping up with costs, and the price of everything from tents to management are increasing dramatically. This was in Sherwood News, written by our friend Patrick Sisson. Spain, grappling with a housing shortage and over-tourism, has ordered Airbnb to take down 66,000 listings in the country that were flaunting the rules. Barcelona has already announced that short-term rentals must be rented long-term or sold by 2028. This was in the New York Times. A study by UCLA of Los Angeles pilot program that funded mobility wallets for residents in South LA found that the program led to people feeling less isolated and stressed while improving mental health. The transportation funding was used for other necessities, and when the pilot ended, people returned to feeling stressed about financial decisions. This was by KTLA and also by UCLA. This is really fascinating, this research into the pilot mobility wallets and how basically when people aren't stressed about funding their transportation, they can fund other priorities in life, and it makes them less stressed out. I want to talk to Madeline Brosen and the other folks, Tamika Butler and others who worked on this project, because I think this is really interesting because it talks about the effects of, the ability to get around, not just whether people can get around or not. I just find that really fascinating. And there's knock-on effects that we don't think about very much that actually are very important. Chinese airlines are worried that market share for big city pairs such as Shanghai to Beijing are facing lower passenger numbers due to competition with high-speed rail. The by train takes just 4 hours and is seen as the more comfortable option. 52 million people took the train, while just under 9 million people flew between the two city pairs last year. South China Morning Post. Yeah, if we had a high-speed rail system, we could do the same. Well, hopefully that gets done soon. We need to go faster. We need to do it better. I can't believe they've built so much in the last 20 years. It's been crazy. Researchers have calculated the Dieselgate emissions scandal, in which car companies such as Volkswagen created defeat devices to beat emissions tests, and it resulted in 16,000 deaths and caused 30,000 cases of asthma in children. This is in The Guardian. This is one of the links from my previous item that I had talked about from my Substack. Yeah, I just feel like we can do better on emissions, and electric vehicles are good. but they also have problems with some of the particulate matters from the tires. And there's research recently showing that the brake dust stuff has gone down. But I really, really think that it's way better than the diesel and what happens there. I know, for a while, Volkswagen was claiming that the diesel was clean. And we know that they were trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, and which was unfortunate because I like Volkswagen as a vehicle when I had them early on. But yeah, actually, I just found out the other day too that several of their vice presidents that were in charge of this system and this service, the way that they were cheating, actually are going to get to go in jail. So there's some repercussions for your deeds. Okay, well, this week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome to keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without it. So thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up all over the last 5 years, and we're super appreciative of that. $2 a month will get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you one of our scarves, transportation scarves, bike or bus, whichever one you choose. And also, you will get free access with a $1 subscription a month to the podcast with no ads. So check that out if you get a chance. Also, I want to mention that we did produce an audiobook version of Raymond Unwin's 1999 classic, Town Planning and Practice. If you want to get your hands on one, go to raymondunwin.com. You can also check it out at your library. I think it's on Libby. It should be. So if you want to, check out Town Planning and Practice from the library, you can do that. We have it everywhere around the world, I believe. It's on a lot of different places. So you don't have to purchase it. You can actually download it and lend it from the library as well. This book was super fun to produce, and if you're a history of planning fan, it's one of the first ones listed on the American Planning Association's 100 Essential Books of Planning. Listener questions and comments. If you have a comment or question, feel free to tweet at us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears. Lately, that's been Blue Sky and LinkedIn, or feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Have any questions, shoot them over to me. And finally, Puppies and Butterflies is the part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it doesn't fit in the other sections. Andor is over. Now we wait for Ahsoka. There's some interesting animated series from Star Wars coming out for all the Star Wars nerds out there. Actually, Munowich and I, Jeff Munowich, who was on the show talking about Star Wars with me, we actually got to go and hang out with Scott Wiener for an hour. We have, for one of the fundraisers for Jeff's, so there's like kids and their schools have fundraisers a lot of times. And so Jeff is part of a parental group who shares the fundraisers of the different schools around the city of San Francisco. And one of the prizes for fundraising was getting to hang out with Scott Wiener for an hour. And so we ponied up and we won. And so we went to go hang out with him and have coffee. And it was really nice to chat with Scott, just to hang out and talk about policy and stuff. And there's really cool stuff coming around the bend from him. And so just kind of a fun Puppies and Butterflies. We got to talk with Scott and hang out, and it was really great. And so I just really like Scott. I think he just does a great job at legislation and just sticking in there. Even when stuff gets hard or stuff gets rejected, he'll come back at it and with a new lease on life every time. So I really appreciate that about him, and it was just fun to sit down and talk about policy. Also, I'm watching Stanley Tucci's New Italy series on National Geographic Channel, which is on Hulu and Disney Plus as well. I love his travel stories, especially about Italy. The episode about Abruzzo was especially touching. I want to ask you guys, do you like food shows like Somebody Feed Phil or travel ones? Hit me up if on the listener questions and comments at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Hit me up because I'm interested if you guys like these shows. I love them. But sometimes it feels like they're copying each other, like they go to the same restaurant, like they go to Lima, Peru, and it's like, we saw that one on the other person's show. But not really Stanley's shows, but I wish I could go to all these places, and I love travel shows. Just it's fun to have that view of other parts of the world and get an eye into somebody else's culture. And Stanley's show in Abruzzo talked about the transhumance, which is a herding program that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years. Just really cool. And so life might be short, but I wish we can go to all these places. But in the meantime, we can watch some of these travel shows that'll do it for us. So let me know. Let me know if you like those travel shows and what you like about them. Would you like a transportation travel show? That would be really cool to kind of go around and see what cities around the world are doing. How about a YouTube show that's like traveling? My wife and I have thought about doing that for a China show. Travel in China would be really fun for folks that might not get to see it, because there's not a lot of folks that go to China. It's really hard to go if you don't have a translator, but it would be really fascinating because there's so much cool stuff. In any event, you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course on my website, and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. Also, we're on Flickr at Transit Nerds. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. So find us wherever you can find us. I know it's a split economy out there with social media being so fragmented away from the old Twitter, but we're trying and we're making friends wherever we go. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Thank you all for listening. I really do appreciate it. I hope you learned something about the world and transportation and cities world today, and we'll see you next time.
Talk